right. All right. So I'll go ahead and get started. I'm Neil Drum. I work for the Drupal Association on the engineering team there. So the Drupal Association, we're the people who keep Drupal.org running, all of Drupal.org, including the subsites like events.drupal.org, Drupal CI, and get.drupalcode.org, of course. Yeah, we're only 4 people on staff, plus tag 1 for infrastructure support for the engineering team. Just kind of recap from the start. Why GitLab? So we want to improve the developer tools on Drupal.org, making it more smooth for people to contribute code back to Drupal, anything that goes in a Git repository. And a few years ago, we migrated get.drupalcode.org to GitLab, but we're not using all of its capabilities right now. And GitLab as a company can do more than our small team as far as providing functionality around Git. It's not just GitLab we're doing. We want to improve the whole contribution process. That includes account creation, making it easier to sign up for an account on Drupal.org, and that'll include things like social sign-in. So if you want to sign in with your GitHub account or Google account or GitLab.com account. Projects and releases, those aren't changing a whole lot. Those are staying on Drupal.org. Projects, they have some metadata that's not in the repository and project browsing on Drupal.org. And releases, those Drupal core expects packaging. And as part of this, we're also able to simplify Drupal.org a bit. And we'll get into that a bit more later. But it'll help us upgrade Drupal.org in the future if there's less stuff and more simple stuff to upgrade. GitLab CI and issues, of course, are being migrated. That's kind of the end goal. So account creation. Let's see, account creation. Just reading all my notes from when I wrote these. Yeah, basically what I said earlier, we had kind of essentially custom solution before. A couple other places used Bakery module. I think Acquia used to use Bakery module for something on acquia.com. So we're switching to Keycloak for single sign-in and social sign-in. And that'll also provide federated login. So a campsite, like if Midcamp wanted logging into the midcamp.org site with your Drupal.org account, that should be possible in the future. So that causes some other changes. Multiple email addresses, those used to be on your account on Drupal.org. Now get.drupalcode.org manages those. So good simplification there, and notifications are enabled via GitLab. And you'll see the login page will look a little bit different in the future. Projects and releases, those aren't changing a whole lot. We have project browsing on Drupal.org, and we want to support project browsing within Drupal itself. And that needs metadata that isn't in Git, and all these pages that aren't in Git. And Drupal core, it expects packaging of releases, updates to the info YAML file, and packages.drupal.org. That's part of what you use when you install a Drupal site with Composer. That handles some making Drupal dependencies work for Composer. And those notifications, those are under settings, under preferences on get.drupalcode.org. So they're a little bit hidden, but yeah, you can set up notifications. And this is also where SSH key management and email management went. And as part of simplifying Drupal.org, project pages changed a little bit. There used to be in the top right, the maintainers used to be the how many commits they made, which is a little unnecessary, focusing on code contributions and something Drupal.org just didn't need to do as far as keeping track of all the commits. So we no longer maintain a database of how many commits someone's made. GitLab has a few visualizations of commits over time, which are better than what we could provide. And let's see. Documentation that used to link off to just the guides on Drupal.org. Now you can put any URL in. So if you want to use GitLab pages in the future, that's a place you can put documentation. And in the future, when issues migrate, that whole issue count block, something will have to change with that, because we won't be able to count issues anymore, because we won't have a local database of to get those numbers quickly. Profile pages, again, there used to be a count of commits at the very bottom of your profile page. That's replaced with a count of issue credits, which we can easily provide. And it's a little bit more inclusive of other types of contribution, not just code contribution. An example of something GitLab provides that we would have taken more effort for us to provide in the past if we wanted to build it or had time to build it is code search. So this still took a bit of effort for us to build out, basically setting up I think Elasticsearch server for GitLab to use, but it handled all of the indexing and everything. There's one big trick to it. We only index the project group. There's also issue forks and sandboxes, which we don't index. So that means you kind of have to get to the project group before you search, and then code search will be there. And big thing that's in progress right now is replacing Drupal CI. So the aim is to get GitLab CI to be feature complete with Drupal CI. So testing both core and contrib projects and the current Drupal 10, 11 core and legacy Drupal 7 that's still maintained. We need core and contrib tested for those. And Drupal CI, it's everything from the container stack. We have to custom build some containers to get extra debugging output and things like that. Actually, the big thing is Drupal supports a really wide variety of PHP versions and database versions and stuff that other people aren't maintaining containers for. Like Drupal 7 has some amount of PHP 5 something compatibility, and no one else cares about those containers, so we have to build them. And we'll have to keep building them with GitLab CI. It's all containers, just changing how we orchestrate them. Assembling a Drupal code base, all of contrib will testing that's assembled in roughly the same way. Linting, PHP lint, CSS lint, and actually running the tests and reporting the results. So the big difference with GitLab CI is, with Drupal, we had patterns established. We could code those into Drupal CI. We know what testing a Drupal project roughly looks like. But with GitLab CI, of course, it's, you can put any project on GitLab. There's no standard way of testing them. So GitLab CI is going to be a bit decentralized. And the other kind of big win is GitLab CI. It's going to handle all the orchestration. Right now we have a Jenkins server. You might have seen dispatcher.drupalci.org, I think is the domain. You really shouldn't be running a public Jenkins server like that, and it's not really designed to, Jenkins is a CI system. It's okay for this, but we're kind of pushing the limits of what Jenkins can do. It'll just be easier to have GitLab do all of that orchestration, running all the mechanics of running the tests. And yeah, as a maintainer, since GitLab's more decentralized, you will need to set up a GitLab CI YAML file in your repository. And that will have all the configuration, replacing the UI on Drupal.org as far as like what to run on commit, what to run on weekly, what to run, the scheduling of all the tasks. And setting up a GitLab CI YAML file is going to be work for every maintainer who wants to keep their testing running. So we want to make that transition as easy as possible. The good news is we have templates that basically you can include portions of that YAML from somewhere else from these templates. So those get you started with testing a Drupal project. Right now, those templates are in a good spot to start. I'd say maybe beta quality. And we're ready to have people, project maintainers, request GitLab CI and test out those templates, see how they work, provide feedback to us and help improve those templates. So there's the slides are linked from the MidCamp site, so you can don't have to type that all out. But yeah, we have that documented, and we in the next few weeks we'll enable CI for more for all projects probably.
That is great news.
Thanks. And of course, GitLab CI has no idea what a patch file is. So when a project switches to GitLab CI, they're also saying you have to use merge requests to contribute. So no more uploading patch files, no more inner diffs and all the mechanics around that. So yeah, different set of tools to learn with merge requests. Yeah.
Is there any sort of UI or feedback for contributor coming to a project as you say GitLab CI to point them, sort of show them that don't submit patches, or is it up to the maintainer to sort of give them that feedback?
So for the I'll repeat the question. Is there any feedback on the issue page about issue patches are no longer accepted? for projects using GitLab CI. Not currently, but we'll certainly need to add that once GitLab CI gains traction. And yeah, we do as the maintainer, you can use Drupal CI and GitLab CI in parallel for a little bit until you get GitLab CI up and running, testing everything correctly. We do ask that you don't run both indefinitely because we do pay for the compute and everything to actually run those tests. Yeah, we'll have that in the future.
What's your assessment as far as the state of the documentation for someone who's interested in setting up GitLab CI? Do you feel like it's in a decent place for someone to come in and follow it?
So I didn't write the documentation. My coworker finished writing it 2 days ago. So it looks pretty thorough, but not a lot of people have used it, and it was finished 2 days ago. So I'm sure it needs work.
But it's gotten attention. That's good news.
Yeah.
Just standard FCI from my experience. If you've had experience with other places, what changes always put you for start using that?
Once a project is moved off of Drupal CI and testing is working for them with all GitLab, then we can look at issues. So the thing that's different about the Drupal project from a lot of other open source projects is we do things like contribution days, have contribution areas at conferences and sprints. So it's a lot more common in the Drupal community to have changes to the code handed off from person to person, not the same. I might start a merge request and say, I don't know how this should be tested, and just leave it for someone else to pick it up and add the testing code. And that's not the way you see GitLab or GitHub usually used. It's usually one person, one change. Yeah, we see, I ran the stats a few days ago. On average, 5.6 people are credited for every Drupal core contribution. And they're not all coding, but there's a lot of non-code contributions around the receive credit. But it's expected that the code changes are handed off from person to person. So we have to figure out how to keep that collaborative sense, and that's why we have the issue forks and merge requests set up the way we do. And credit, that's also something that's become really important in the Drupal ecosystem that is not seen in the same way in other open source projects. And before getting into that issue credit too much, just want to remind people, it's not just issues. They're on your profile. I consider credit to be anything that shows up on your user profile, anything that shows up on your organization profile if you have an organization. So in the we've added contributor roles, stuff like ongoing roles in the community, and documentation that's linked that you've maintained, that's linked from your user profile page. And what else do I have on here? Organizations, if they're supporting a project, as in like sponsoring a maintainer, that's been in case studies. But for GitLab, the main thing it's going to be affecting is issue credit. So GitLab, they don't have anything like issue credit built in. and GitLab's a product. It's not like Drupal where we can just add something to a page. So we'll be rebuilding it on Drupal and pulling in data from get.drupalcode.org. And the only interface we have to put stuff on the screen in GitLab is places like a bot posting a comment. So there'll be prompts in the GitLab UI for, hey, this issue was closed out. Remember to update your, if you were a contributor to this issue, remember to say if it was on behalf of an organization or as a volunteer. And if you're a maintainer, go say which contributors made useful contributions. And you, of course, can do this throughout the issue lifecycle. You don't have to wait until the end. But yeah, it'll be a separate system over on Drupal.org. We have a bit of UI work to do, but it's all fielded data. It's stuff Drupal can handle as far as actually building that.
Is it expected to be a fully manual thing, or will that be like a special format you can put out comments?
So the question was if it's all manual or through this UI, or if you can, commit. Well, yeah, the commit message, we can pull that in. The commit messages that I have a feeling this might have to change the formatting. The standard get commit message to credit someone is commit trailers, like the signed off by : email address, reviewed by : email address, kind of like headers at the bottom of the commit message. That's more likely to be fit into how GitLab will make commit messages automatically. The whole listing usernames at the front, that's not something I've seen other projects do. And it's a little harder to parse because usernames, your get.drupalcode.org username is actually technically could be different from your Drupal.org username, and people change usernames. But yeah, it will be some amount of a UI on a separate site to remember to do. There's also stuff throughout Drupal.org that depends on issues, such as the change records. So anything that's referencing issues on Drupal.org, where we have this nice kind of color coding, that we can't do that anymore because we won't have issues in the local Drupal database. So you have to unwind all of that integration and replace it with GitLab integration. So you might have noticed change records have changed slightly in the last few months. That's where we're preparing for that, that unlinking. Yep.
You said it's going away. You mean that that implementation won't exist, or the implementation of it needs to be replaced with integration with GitLab? Or TBD?
Yeah, so case by case, some things, those references to issues on Drupal.org, they'll just go away, and we're not replacing the functionality. Places like change records, it's important to keep that functionality, so we have to build a new integration with GitLab, which will be, more code than integrating with Drupal, because Drupal, it has any reference module built in, and stuff like making references to other content on the site, it's natural in Drupal. But that depends on having the entity there in the database, so you can query it. And GitLab, you build API integrations. So stuff like if we want to do that color coding, we can make a request on the front end in JavaScript to check GitLab's API. Hey, is this open or closed? What color should we make it? So yeah, a bit of JavaScript code is, it's not that much more than a entity reference, and whatever was doing this in PHP, but it's a re-implementation, potentially a little bit more code in our code base. So kind of the theme is like, this isn't saving work or complexity on Drupal.org. Not having issues. Yeah, that's a little less complexity there, but about half of the functionality on issues was the contribution credit. Like that's not moving since GitLab doesn't have it. And then the actual migration of issues, once all of the once all of the things kind of coupling issues to Drupal.org are uncoupled, then we can actually start migrating issues. And the way we'll do that is project by project. So it won't be we can't migrate everything all at once. And we aim to preserve as much as practical, all of the metadata. GitLab keeps track of metadata in a little bit different way. They don't have the the 8 fields or whatever we have for status and priority, but they do have labels that can replace that. And so we got a little bit of a head start in the code for that. We have a draft that's of the code that's can migrate issues, but of course they'll need a lot of review, and we have all of those links to Drupal.org, like issues, those entity references, and Drupal CI. So yeah, this is where we are. And also the little Drupal icons on these, we're also Drupal.org's a Drupal 7 site. So we're looking to ways to simplify, have less to migrate, and once we move to Drupal 10, stuff like the issue credit, we're building that UI completely on Drupal 10. We're not going to build it on 7 and then migrate it. And yeah, the meta issue to follow along is there on the screen. There's a Drupal Slack channel. Best way to help is to help test things as they become available, especially merge requests, and especially GitLab CI, now that we have that documented, and we're ready for a few more project maintainers to give that a try. And also, there's a couple people, probably only one person working on making the testing work for Drupal core, so we'll need that as well. And yeah, links to these slides and the feedback form are on the MidCamp website. Any questions? Yeah.
So GitLab supports includes. Are that how the templates are intended to be used?
Yes. Yeah. So yeah, GitLab CI YAML, it's a whole syntax, and I don't personally write a lot of GitLab CI files, but yeah, it's a programming language crammed into a YAML file, and it has includes.
Great. I didn't know. That was my big wonder, because I had to look into is this, that modules update bot could be a job, and everybody just includes that template that's hosted by the inference team or whatever.
Yep.
And they don't need to customize it or copy paste YAML across.
Awesome.
Yeah, so yeah, in the future, yeah, when people come up with good automations like the project update bot, run Rector and all the other tools in that suite, yeah, they can yeah, either in our default templates, we could add a build step, run what's the, is it project updater? Yeah, run project updater. And yeah, we could either hopefully in the template say like, you know, by default, run it weekly or something like that.
So are there going to be any real restrictions on the kind of containers you could run or?
No, so yeah, we don't. Yeah, the question was, are there restrictions on the types of containers? And yeah, we're not able to put restrictions in for that. So we will be monitoring how many minutes, CI minutes people run their tests for, because we don't want to pay for you know, abuse of the system or you know, just over testing. Like if you're testing every version of supported version of PHP with every database, you know, multiply that by, you know, every supported version of Drupal core, you could easily get to you know, 10, 20, 30 tests running on commit, and you don't need to be running you know 30 minutes or an hour of testing for every commit, or so yeah, we will have to limit how many minutes the projects run for, because we do, you know, the compute costs money and we're outside of all the free tiers of you know, GitLab.com. They'll give you a little bit of testing for free, but not the amount we need.
So like these templates, are they gonna have the ability to say like only run the test if there's an open merge request or?
Let me,
I could do a situation where, you know, you're working on something, you know it's not ready for a test, but you wanna push it up so you don't lose it, right?
yeah, this is what the documentation looks like. And yeah, I think that's so yeah, like it has scheduling, and yeah, I can't read any of this since it's up on the screen, but yeah, this is where we are with the documentation so far. Any other questions?
Can you talk a little bit about, I'm sure you've had discussions about timing, you have projects that are potentially very old and don't really have people maintaining them. But people might be using those projects and have composer files with patches. I guess as we go on from 9 to 10, you know, 8 to 9 and 9 to 10, that things will be sort of deprecated by default. But have you had much discussion about timing and about when will there be a hard cutoff where the issue system will not work anymore, where patches won't be available, and that will be quoting in the CI world?
Yeah, so yeah, around timing, a lot of, yeah, everything we do will be project by project. You know, right now it's an opt-in process for GitLab CI, and you know, be like that for some number of yeah, some number of months likely. You know, even when we enable the ability to use Drupal or GitLab CI for all projects, it still requires that manual step of adding a GitLab CI YAML file. And yeah, at some point, you know, 6 months or a year from now, however the timing works out, we'll wind down Drupal CI, and because it's technical debt. We can't be maintaining two CI systems.
So would you still be having those patches available on, I mean. Because I'm saying, the best, download the patch command into your repo, right? But, I mean, with those. Are those patches going to disappear entirely, or are they still be available if?
Everything in the issue queue will be migrated. So yeah, patches will become attachments to the GitLab issue, just like any other files on the
So if you have
issues.
points.
Yeah, although it probably redirects and everything. Like, we aim to keep the transition as smooth as possible. So any images uploaded to the issue, those will either be uploaded to the GitLab issue, or we could link them over and keep them hosted in our static file server. But yeah, they'll be available, so you'll know every image, every patch that's been uploaded previously. And quick note, since you mentioned patching Drupal installs, you can get a patch for a merge request. Yeah, .patch or .diff to the end of the URL on GitLab on the merge request, but don't deploy that. Don't reference that directly, because any merge request, any pull request on GitHub, it could change in the future, and you probably want to know what you're deploying. So make a local copy of the patch, apply that with Composer patches, or if you have a bunch of stuff going on in your code base, maybe make a private fork like you would do on any other project you would be deploying. I saw another question.
Being able to include the default YAML for GitHub CI is huge. That is amazing. It's going to be a big game changer. I'm curious if any discussion or thought on like a further step to allow maintainers like one-click process to add that default configuration to their project without, I guess with the idea of exposing more people to it in the UI as it gets rolled out, make it more common, more prevalent, not just for the maintainers who already know about it or sought it out, like how can we get it by them?
As far as automating, enabling GitLab CI and actually using GitLab CI, I could imagine potentially these GitLab CI YAML files for each project, they'll follow a pattern pretty well, and we could potentially generate a good place to start and open a merge request for each project and say, hey, this looks like a good place to start. As a general rule, we don't make automatic commits to your repository. We've stayed away from that.
Well, I was thinking more even like a review project, like a project creation time. Or on GitHub, for example, we create a new project, MP repo. We'll say like, you want to add a license, you want to add, I forget, a region, and make it easy. And I want to shout out also the 13th work on going in the reverse direction. I love the new functionality for project pages where you're able to easily pull in the context of the preview. It's like been wanting that for so long. So like I was thinking about something like that kind of going in the other direction.
Yeah, GitLab does have project templates for new projects, so that is something that could be set up.
It's already in the process. Because on the GitHub page, in the create new repo, it says, do you want to have GitLab -ci.yaml? And if you click there, it will create this file for you, and you can have an option to either say create merge request to commit it, or you can just commit it to the new model. And in addition to that full step, there's an option to submit, to the GitLab itself, the option to have default template. And, there was conversation about doing in the future, so if we have a couple of developers who have half an hour, maybe hour and a half, or 3 hours and a half to actually finish this part, it will be played by Drupal Association. Because there's like nice, you can say, pick the PHP YAML, or pick what are all the other YAML, and there's an option. The beauty of the GitLab being open source is that Drupal Association can submit requests. Okay, this is the Drupal icon, this is the file, but it takes work and takes time.
Yeah, yeah, I'm not sure I can summarize all that for the recording, but yeah, yeah, one of the learning experiences around using GitLab has been, you know, our old system is maintenance free, nothing changed, so there was no real maintenance burden. You know, sometimes you know, we'd look at, be like, how's this still running? It's you know, there's like a Python SSH daemon somehow that was still working, but don't touch it, it keeps working. GitLab, they're on a release schedule. They make they put in a bunch of new features every month. So they have security releases every once or twice a month. So you know, we're in the same position everyone else is with updating Drupal core potentially every month. You know, you wait and you want to update it pretty quickly. And you know, we're you know, about, you know, around the beginning of the month, we know someday sometime there will be a GitLab security release. So do those updates promptly. And let's see, you know, there's move this over. You know, this is the disk use for that past 6 months. Something changed around January 1st, and now it's becoming a problem. So we need to figure out where to get 40% of the disk back, or, you know, the other solution would be buy more disks, or you know, provision more disks on AWS. But you know, things change every month, and you know, this one we kind of let it ride for what January was 4 months ago, 3 months ago, but now it's becoming a problem. So that's part of you know, we're not just moving things over to GitLab, we're also doing production support, being site reliability engineers for this product. Yeah.
So I just checked, and not only when you're setting up a new project, but also on an existing project, GitLab provides buttons to add a README, add a license, add a changelog, and set up CI/CD. It looks as though if you use that button, you get the standard GitLab YAML file. So we're sort of the UI is there, and what we have to do is figure out how to get the Drupal specific CI configuration set at the GitLab default.
Yeah. So yeah, the question or comment was, yes, GitLab has all of these kind of on, you know, GitLab, they have a business interest in you using GitLab CI because on GitLab.com, you know, you'll pay for it, and you know, their business model is to become the, I think full stack, like, you know, ideation to deployment system for code. So they want you to see GitLab CI. There's all sorts of on-roads to enabling GitLab CI, but there's a few, you know, there's some options with that that we can keep finding more ways to put the Drupal templates front and center, like have that, I believe, when you enable GitLab CI for a project on the through the GitLab UI, it gives you a choice of templates, and I think we can add stuff to that list. But yeah, there's places we can make that more kind of the defaults and or available options.
I would love to see that for new projects. So I think there still is value for existing projects, bubbling up the great work we're doing, you know, not committing code to people's repositories for them, but kind of promoting that this work is available in places that, you know, they can see it. The other example I would give is the tugboat integration that's on people.org. I talked to a lot of people that don't know that that exists. And, you know, it'd be great to, you know, somewhere in the project page for maintainers say, hey, you can, with this button or copy paste this, you know, and add it to your project, you can get tugboat running along your merge request. You know, so I think there's a bit of like, it's kind of a marketing piece to the technology work that you all are doing, and it's really great. And I'd love to see more people made aware of it.
Yep. Yeah. I definitely have seen in GitLab, you can have customized new project templates. So we could make a specific Drupal module template. We never want to, you know, we always want that to be an option because you might be bringing your code base from somewhere else, importing Git repository. So you should always have the option to start with a blank repository, but we should also have the option to start a what most Drupal projects look like with themes modules.
Even for existing projects, like this way for people to add that again without like seeking it out. In fact, they don't know that that tugboat exists on people.org. Finding the documentation, doing all that would be great on the project pages. So that they're like, oh, yeah, you can click this button and we will copy paste the code for you. It's just like we do for merge requests, you know, for merge requests, we've got some UI that says copy these sets of commands and it will add the other remote, it will check out the branch for you. Like, I think there's great work there that's
Yeah, and we can, you know, we can keep adding stuff like you know, more advertisements and features to Drupal.org. Within the GitLab UI, options are a little limited to, you know, we can't add arbitrary things to the issue page other than or merge request page other than comments. But yeah, part of the collaboration will be, you know, a comment made by a bot on the issue, like here's the fork for this to contribute code. Here's a little bit of information on how to get started. Yes, go ahead and commit stuff to this, it's fine. And here's the commands to set it up in the set up your Git copy the way you'd like. Or you know, use the GitLab web IDE. They're also pushing that. I think I saw the latest release of GitLab. It has like more autocomplete stuff in within the GitLab web IDE. So, you know, they're on the whole AI bandwagon. See how it does.
We can already edit. You can use web IDE from GitLab. There is the feature available right now, and there is a path to specific Drupal basically based templates. I think I'll file on Drupal.org in under infrastructure project description of how people can add the icon where you can click and say Drupal default template. And this is the beauty of collaborating between two open source projects. GitLab is open source, Drupal is open source, so they can collaborate and get things done for their end users.
Right. Any other questions? All right, thanks.